Welcome to the Bronx Journal. When you think of art, what do you think of? The Metropolitan, the Guggenheim, the Museum of Natural History? These are all very well-known art institutions in Midtown Manhattan. But have you ever ventured away from Museum Mile? Did you know that there is a hidden treasure, very impressive Spanish museum in Washington Heights? It's called the Hispanic Society of America, and it is truly one of New York's best-kept secrets. If you're interested in Spanish art and culture, you must make time to see this museum's impressive collection of decorative arts, prints, paintings, sculptures, textiles by Spain's most prominent artists. Here to tell us about the Hispanic Society of America is its Senior Curator, Marcus Burke. It's a pleasure, Mr. Burke, having you on the program.
Thank you, Miguel.
I interviewed you a long time ago. You know I have a passion for the same thing you feel a passion for, Spanish culture and art. Tell me about the Hispanic Society of America and why do so few New Yorkers know about it?
It's partly because of our location. We're in Upper Manhattan. We're located between 155th and 156th Streets west of Broadway. It's a large pedestrian area called Audubon Terrace. It is, however, right next to the 157th Street subway stop, so it's rather easy to get to.
Why don't New Yorkers, enough New Yorkers know about it? I mean, I went there one time and I actually was outside in a courtyard where you have this amazing statue of El Cid right outside, and there were kids playing stickball, Hispanic kids playing stickball right outside the museum. And I said, guys, do you know what's on the other side of the wall here? And they had no clue. So how do we get these children inside the museum so that they know their own heritage?
Well, I think if you came up now, you'd find that's changed quite a bit. We have an extremely active, or I might say proactive education program. We go to local schools. We bring school children in constantly. We have a coordinator of education who sets this up. We have docents who give tours. So that's changed quite a bit, even in the last 5 years.
What I tell my friends about the museum is you go there and you walk in and you're in Spain several centuries ago.
That's true. Our collection is centered on the Iberian Peninsula, but now increasingly on Latin America. We have several galleries dedicated to Latin American colonial art, for example, marvelous works from Mexico, Peru, Bolivia, and so forth. But it's true that the largest number of the objects we exhibit are from Spain. We are, however, wider than that. We use the word Hispanic in its original dictionary meaning, which means the arts of, in our case, ancient Iberia, medieval Iberia, including Muslim Iberia, Spain, Portugal, Latin America, and any place in the world where Spanish or Portuguese have been spoken languages.
So anything of Spanish origin?
That's right. Even the southwestern United States would come under that net. And as a result, we cast a very, very wide net indeed. We also, in terms of time, move from the Neolithic to the present day. So there's an awful lot of human culture involved in what we do.
So please drop a few names on me. I mean, who are the artists who are represented there?
Well, in the painting collection, people will recognize the names of El Greco,
of course,
Velázquez, Murillo, and especially Francisco de Goya. Perhaps our most famous painting is Francisco de Goya's portrait of the Duchess of Alba of 1797, which many of your viewers would recognize.
So let's go back a little bit. How does this center, this wonderful place, get started? Where does it get its funding? Why devote? Initially, it was devoted mostly to Spanish art and culture, no?
Well, in the museum,
came.
But we're more than a museum. Let me explain. In 1904, a man named Archer Milton Huntington founded the Hispanic Society. He was the son of Collis Potter Huntington, the man who created the transcontinental railroads.
Very wealthy people.
Very wealthy people.
Okay.
Our founder inherited $153 million in 1900.
Okay.
That's like $3 billion today or something like that. A lot of money. And with that, he founded 12 institutions. We're one of 12 sibling institutions around the world. But in our case, he wanted to establish a center that would collect, care for, study, interpret, and exhibit the cultures of, as I said, ancient Iberia, Spain, Portugal, and Latin America. We are a library of modern books. We are a rare books library with rare books and manuscripts. We're a prints and photographs department. We're a study center, particularly medieval studies, but all sorts of studies. We're a publication program, and we're a museum. So that there's an awful lot going on under the roof, and a lot of people don't see. Although anyone can go in the library, it's open on demand to any adult with a serious interest in Hispanic culture. We're also the guardians of an immense number of objects. Would you like me to give you some ideas of the size?
Absolutely, please.
Well, in the library alone, we have 15,000 rare books before 1700.
Okay.
Now that's a collection the size of the National Library of Spain.
Are these books, obviously, most of them published outside of the United States?
They almost all were published either in Spain or Portugal or Latin America, but then there's books in that were published in places like Goa in India, that was part of the Portuguese Empire, and so forth. So it's really a rather wide group, but that's before 1700. We have another 20,000 rare books, we call them modern rare books, between 1701 and 1830. We have 1/3 modern books, 1/3 books of science and study, and they're published everywhere, but they focus on Hispanic culture. In our manuscripts, it's really quite extraordinary. We have 225,000 manuscripts going back to the 12th century. We have letters from Elizabeth of England to Philip II of Spain 5 months before the Spanish Armada.
The authentic stuff.
The authentic stuff, the
Wow.
real stuff. We have signatures of the conquistadores. We have the minutes of the cabildos of Latin America in the 16th century. So it's really an amazing collection, including a map of the world that was drawn in 1526 by Juan Vespucci, Amerigo Vespucci's nephew. In the prints and photographs collection, we have 17,000 prints and posters, all the works of Goya except perhaps 1 or 2 single sheets. We have 150,000 ethnographic photographs going back to the 1840s.
So this stuff is in storage, most of it's not on exhibit.
Because it's work on paper, it can't be left out, but it is available for scholars, and we do mount special exhibitions of it.
And other museums borrow some of your stuff
Of
and
course.
vice versa? How does that work?
Well, we don't borrow, but we do lend under very special collaborative arrangements. I'm about to go next month to the Prado Museum in Madrid, where we have
Wonderful place.
collaborated with an exhibition. We also have very interesting other collections. We have 125,000 Latin American big band recordings.
Wow.
You know, Eddie Palmieri's celebrating his 80th birthday this year. We've got stuff he made when he was a kid.
So you have albums.
Chuya Reyes, Enrique Madriguera, Javier Cugat, all the stuff from the 20s and 30s and 40s. We have this amazing collection.
Well, see, if people in the neighborhood knew about that, I think a lot more would be coming in just to listen to that music.
Oh gosh, when Tito Puente was about 75, we gave him a gold medal, and we had a big concert on our terrace, and he just incinerated the place, you know. We have, in my department, the museum department, we have 23,000 unique objects, paintings, drawings, metalwork, ceramics, textiles, glass, sculpture, antiquities, an enormous collection of resources for all Hispanics of whatever origin.
All right, so let me give you my own personal example. I am doing research right now on the history of Hispanics in the United States from the time of the conquistadors. Like one of the things that I'm looking up, trying to find right now is La Relación, the first book, probably the first American history book, written by a Spaniard in 1542 when he went back to Spain. I'm talking about Cabeza de Vaca. How much of that information would I find in the museum?
I'm not sure whether we have that particular book in our rare books department, but with 15,000 rare books before 1700 and 225 books before 1500, it's highly likely
Before
that a book like that,
1500.
and we're aggressively acquiring Latin American imprints. So that's a very important aspect of what we're doing too.
And when you lend, you also lend to Latin American museums?
Of course. We have enormously close connections with the Museo Nacional in Mexico, with several of the exhibition centers there. We've mounted many works collaboratively with the Franz Mayer Museum in Mexico City. Previously in Venezuela, we've done a lot of work with the National Museum in Lima, Museo de Arte de Lima. We did a collaborative exhibition here in New York with them, down on Park Avenue at the Amerigo Society. So we have very close relationships with Latin American institutions.
Frankly, I have to tell you, when I ask Latinos in New York, so what's our Hispanic museum? Where everybody says the same thing, El Museo del Barrio. And very few people will cite the American Society, you know.
Well, we have enormous respect for the Museo del Barrio, and we collaborate intimately with them. The last two directors have been people I've worked with quite a bit. We do programs down there. We lend works of art to them on a regular basis. They have a small but growing collection.
It's more a contemporary
It's more
approach.
an exhibition area. But what they do wonderfully is that they are an education department that interprets Hispanic culture, or perhaps we should say Latino culture, because they are focused on Latin American culture, to the New York community. And it grew out of the fact that in the old days there was a barrio Puerto Riqueño there on the east side in Manhattan. This has become much more diverse. There's 38,000 people of Mexican origin.
But even the neighborhood that you're in, that's also changed
But
a lot.
we have the great fortune to be in the middle of a Dominican barrio, and it has made all the difference where we are. It's just wonderful, the result of that group coming in. And many of my colleagues, in both professionals and also our guards and so forth, are Dominican, and we've had a close working relationship with the Centro Leon Jimenez in Santiago de los Caballeros. So this is something we're very aware of, indeed. And it's also something where we have groups from the barrio coming in and doing cultural programs and so forth, especially dance and music, groups of that sort of thing.
In the case of the Dominican community, for example, they have the Zona Colonial in the Dominican Republic, in Santo Domingo, where you go to these places and they tell you this is the first street in the hemisphere. This is the first piece of art that ever came into the hemisphere. This is the first church that was ever built. And so they come with this understanding already of that history.
Yes, and we must not forget that the first non-indigenous resident of Manhattan was from the Dominican Republic.
And who was he?
Oh, they're about to name the Upper Manhattan after him, you know. He was an employee of the Dutch who interpreted Indian languages, and he was sent as a kind of adelantero, an advance man, for PR terms, to go to Manhattan and start communicating with the Native American people here on behalf of the Dutch. And there was a wonderful exhibition at the Museo del Barrio of Hispanic New York that went back to the very beginnings. And I think this is important because, you know, North Americans tend to think of ourselves as America, right? But it was Latin America that was the first America. And it's that America we exhibit, the first America.
You know, also Americans don't recognize like the first 100 years before Jamestown and before the Mayflower, which was almost all Spanish discoveries in what is now the United States.
You know, something I love to show in our museum is we have some choir stalls. Choir stalls are big wooden units. They're 20 feet high, and they're carved in beautiful Renaissance style. And they came out of a church in Lima, San Francisco. And what happened is that the choirs in a lot of Hispanic churches are in the middle of the congregation. And in order to see the altar, they had to open this up. And these choir stalls, these seats with their sculpted backdrop, were sent up to us because they had been taken out of the church so you could see the altar. They were made in 1670.
Wow.
Now, they were just the furniture in a huge Renaissance Baroque church in a new city, a city founded in the 1500s, but that already by 1670 had brought avenues and palaces and cathedrals and squares and sculpture. This is just the furniture. Now, in 1670, the European settlers of North America were living in what were little more than mud huts. And that's what I mean, that they in Peru were the first America, and Mexico, and of course the Dominican Republic, which has a Gothic cathedral, the first cathedral church built in the New World. Why was it built as a Gothic cathedral? Because it was built when Gothic art was modern.
Absolutely.
And that's how old it is. We're talking about half a millennium here. It's not something Johnny come lately. It's been here a long time.
But when you say New Yorkers don't know that history, or Americans don't know that history, the Spanish side of our heritage, you know, you go back to even the Hudson River, which was known as the San Antonio before it was known as the Hudson, because Spanish mapped it and named it before Henry Hudson. And after Verrazano, but before Hudson, they named it. They called it the San Antonio. Now no one knows. When they're crossing the Hudson every day, Latinos don't know that they're crossing the San Antonio River.
They think San Antonio is a city in Texas.
Yes.
Named after the same St. Anthony. Mm-hmm. The Strait of Magellan was called the Strait of St. Anthony too. It's depending on what day you arrived at the river, you named it after the saint. But this is exactly the kind of resource we show. This map of the world by Juan Vespucci, who was a Spaniard, but he was the nephew of the Italian Amerigo. And like his uncle, he was a captain pilot, licensed to take people to the New World.
Amerigo Vespucci, we should say America got its name from Amerigo Vespucci instead of Columbus. A lot of people believe that America should have been named Colombia.
Yeah, but Columbus didn't have a nephew who, in addition to being a pilot, was a cartographer and made a map of the world, and he sent that up to what's today Brussels or Antwerp to be engraved and put his uncle's name on the continent, and that kind of stuck. You see, there's a history to all this, and you can see that. If you're of Mexican origin, we have 13 generations of the Macuilxochitl family of Zapotec rulers. If you are from Peru, we have no end to objects to celebrate your direct historical antecedents, and this is true for every Latin American country, and also places like New Mexico and Texas. We believe in the universal value of the Hispanic tradition, and that includes, of course, the Islamic world as well, so that, and if you go to the Metropolitan Museum, in their Islamic galleries, you'll find a gallery that we mounted of Western Islamic art, Spain and Morocco, where most of our really, really amazing Islamic objects are on display. It's a 10-year program we're doing with them because we thought we could access a larger audience in that context and also help out a sister institution here in New York.
Mr. Burke, it's been a wonderful experience having you here. I'm hoping we can do this again because I could go on and on talking to you for hours. Tell us where people can find out more about the society.
Well, we are located on Broadway at we're called Audubon Terrace because it was John James Audubon's farm, the American artist. It's between 155th Street and 156th Street, west of Broadway. There's plenty of places to park. The subway stop on the number 1 train is 157th Street, and we're 1 stop away from the Columbia Presbyterian Hospital and therefore the George Washington Bridge, if that will help people orient themselves.
Website, telephone number.
www.hispanicsociety.org. We're an org, not a com. www.hispanicsociety.org. You'll get all the information and updated information on exhibitions and so forth at that website.
And admission is free?
Absolutely free by our charter, but if you want to donate, we're happy to receive it.
And when is the museum open?
We're open Tuesday through Saturday from 10 to 4:30 and on Sunday from 1 to 4.
Thank you again. A pleasure having you here.
It's always a pleasure.
We'll be back with more of the Bronx Journal. Stay tuned.